Okay, well, welcome everybody. To the Internet Librarian Connect 2024. My name is Richard Hulser. I'm a consultant for libraries and archives based in West Hollywood in the Los Angeles area of California. And today we are in track B, using AI in libraries. Our first session will be on AI basics, and our speaker this morning or this afternoon, depending upon which time zone you're in, is Laura Warner, who is manager of library resources at the Branford Public Library. So I turn it over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Richard. And thank you everyone for joining me this morning. It's really exciting to speak about this. And allow me to introduce myself and share my screen here. Go. Presentation mode. Okay. So welcome to our session on AI basics. I think that this is going to set everyone up with some good base knowledge before you get into the more in-depth sessions that are on this morning, today, and this afternoon. I'm going to introduce myself here. I'm using a very real photo because we're about to launch into very artificial and alien type topics. So here is a picture of me, and I have over 15 years in library leadership experience. I started in corporate libraries and then eventually moved to public libraries. I was a director at the Saskatoon Public Library and more recently at the Brantford Public Library, where I have overseen some major technology projects such as the launch of an intranet, uh, the alternative service delivery implementation of library kiosks. We've launched markets, maker spaces, did ILS migration, and did RFID conversions. And the reason I got into this profession was I saw how important libraries were to connecting people to information, whether that was to connect people to information and the tools to help them reach their full potential, to help bridge the digital divide, and to combat misinformation. So I've been focusing a lot on reading about AI and experimenting with AI over the past couple of years because I really think we're on the precipice of the next revolution. Just as the printing press or the internet changed the way that we live, work, learn, interact with one another, and even our sense of self, this is going to have even greater and more far reaching changes to our society. And as professionals who help people and support people through their relationship with information, I think we have an important role to play here. So I really think it's important that we understand it. So a bit of an agenda here for you. The welcome and introduction we've gone through. I'll go through some high-level goals of what I hope you get out of this session. We'll go through definitions of AI terms because there's a lot of terms out there, and we're just going to pare down and look at a few and explain them, hopefully in plainer language so that we're all more comfortable with them. We're going to go through some resource examples too, some obvious and some others that you might want to implement into your day-to-day work, but there are other sessions on this afternoon that might be of greater interest and go into more detail in that. We'll look at high-level risks and concerns of AI, not to scare us all off of AI, but just to be aware so that we can move forward in a more informed manner. And we'll look at opportunities for AI and the importance of our role too in libraries. Again, that'll be high level. There are other sessions that will go deeper into that. So what I do hope you get out of this after today's session is to demystify artificial intelligence a little bit for you, as much as we can. Overview of the terminology so you feel a bit more comfortable with some of the lingo and the acronyms, and to understand how we're already using AI, and we have been for quite a few years. I'll introduce some new concepts. We want to educate ourselves a bit over the threats and concerns, and we want to be excited about the opportunities and our role in the ethical and productive implementation of artificial intelligence. As I mentioned earlier, this is the next revolution. As much as other revolutions in the past have risen and have had a significant amount of pushback and denial, this one is no different. There may be naysayers, there may be people who are thinking and hoping, oh, if we just ignore AI, it will go away. It will not. So we should start to get a little bit more comfortable with it. And again, go forward in an informed manner. So what is artificial intelligence? So we hear the term AI all the time, and AI is the branch of computer science that helps machines analyze vast amount of data and learn so they can perform tasks and usually tedious tasks that humans don't have to do. So Netflix uses AI to analyze your behaviors, your viewing patterns, how many times you've watched The Office, and they use that and they make recommendations for you. They have an amazing amount of data, and that's why you see all your thumbnails constantly changing in the background. Narrow artificial intelligence. So this is a type of artificial intelligence which uses a learning algorithm designed to perform a single task. So that's where you get your AI and your voice assistants like Siri and Alexa. Narrow AI also includes things like your email filters. It filters out the spam and the harmful emails, and it gives you the proper emails that you're supposed to be receiving. If you've ever used a word processor that has any type of spelling or grammar check in it, that's also narrow AI. Chatbots are narrow AI. They work off of a script and answer questions. I'll get into those a bit later too, but this is all AI that you've been using and are embedded in our computers, emails, and phones for quite a while. So generative AI, that's a much deeper and more complex form of AI. It's the AI capable of generating content, such as written articles, code, or images. And there's also another branch that we won't get into, but it's called SAI, that's super artificial intelligence. And that's the concept that machines will eventually become smarter than us. But for now, we're going to look at how we're using AI now and in the imminent future. You'll probably hear terms like pattern recognition algorithms as well, and we'll get into how those work in the next slide. But pattern recognition, what it means is it's the practice of teaching a computer to recognize similarities or repeated elements in data. And an algorithm is a series of step-by-step instructions that tell a computer or human, how to solve a problem and perform an action. So that's why when you shop on Amazon and then you start seeing a For You, it's looking at your old patterns and what you've been looking at before, and it's making helpful suggestions to you. It's also why when you look at one video on TikTok of a cat, and then suddenly your whole feed is of cats because it thinks that that's what you want based on that previous behavior. Chatbots. Now, they're a form of narrow AI, and you'll see them quite a bit in retail if you go to a website, and some libraries use them too. So they are following a script of commonly asked questions, mainly about site migration and other customer queries. So if you're asking when does the library open or close, a chat box is responding to that based on what it has been pre-programmed to respond to. If you go on a clothing commercial website and you're looking for something, you can ask it where on the site you can look for shoes, socks, etc. It will help you guide you through that. If you ask something complex and not on script, it's going to then beckon a human, and then you'll have someone personally to talk to if your problem is a little bit more complex. So it's going to stay on the script. So now we're going to delve a bit deeper into AI terms. Machine learning and deep learning. So machine learning, this is a subset of AI, which allows machines to learn from data and mimic human brain functions to produce more advanced outcomes. So like when you're riding a bike, you use a lot of trial and error. Learning to ride a bike, you use a lot of trial and error. So when you have a negative result, like you turn too fast and you fall off your bike, you're not going to repeat that pattern again. So machine learning is all about patterns and making assumptions based on those patterns. Like if the weather outside is cold for 5 days in a row, you're going to assume it's going to be cold again tomorrow. And they're being used a lot. Machine learning has been used across a lot of industries. For example, it's helping medical professionals detect the presence of disease. And they're even using it in interesting ways, like to detect your emotional state via your smartphone data and what music you're listening to on Apple Music or Spotify. And this is also what's powering your algorithms and your pattern recognition. So that's where you're seeing this is what you might like on Amazon or on Netflix, for example. And it's also helping manufacturers with production processes and banks with to prevent fraud. It's been used for a lot of helpful and proactive things. And the way this works is three ways. There's supervised learning. So that's when a human being is creating inputs and outputs, and they're watching the machine learn and testing it. The second type is unsupervised learning, where a human's just putting tons of data into the machine and letting it go on its own. And finally, there is reinforcement learning, and this is where the machine itself learns through trial and error based on rewards and punishments, which is really fascinating. But don't worry, we won't get too into the weeds of the technology here. Deep learning is also fascinating. It's the cognitive science and neural networks that make conclusions more interesting. So think back to your biology class and when you learned about the human brain and how we have neurons. Now take that concept and apply it to machines. And a good example of deep learning is something like Google or Tesla's self-driving cars. So these cars are powered by machine learning, including deep learning, which allows them to interpret and predict and respond to the data that's critical for autonomous driving. Large language models. Now, this is a type of AI that learns language. So just as when you're learning a language, you start with the alphabet, you move on to words, you move on to phrases, and then you're going to move on to full sentences. So this takes place over time, but you eventually get a grasp of the language and of the culture, and it starts to be able to fill in the blanks. So when you type in New York, the large language model will predict city. So this is where text generation and summarizing content, and rewriting content and analyzing sentiment, categorizing, and even having a conversation, this is that product. And this is where I will go through a few examples too, but this is the type of model that you see, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes of the world. These are large language models and how they've come to be developed. Okay, so natural language processing, you might hear somebody say NLP, and that's a type of AI that enables our computers to understand spoken like voice prompts and written human language. So the Alexa, the Siri, the writing into ChatGPT, and it enables features like text and speech recognition. And you might also hear about NLG. That's a branch of NLP. It's natural language generation, and it's associated with the processing of structured and unstructured fields into natural language. So that's the writing element of NLP. So when it's writing back to you and responding to you. Okay, and then we have our generative pre-trained informers. So that's a program or mathematical structure designed to make predictions, generate outputs, and identify parameters. So that's the generating and it's been pre-trained on tons of data that's been just pumped into it, and then it has the computer science behind it to come up with a logic and think through and predict what the answer should be. So I mentioned that we have all been using AI for a long time. If you have a computer, if you have a phone, if you have access to email, if you use Google, you are using AI all the time. And there's some other helpful tools and entities that you can implement, and I'm sure that some other presenters will get into them this afternoon. I asked other colleagues what they use, and I've thought about what I use too. One I'd like to highlight is Grammarly. It's fantastic. I've been using it for years because it was much more advanced than the spelling and grammar check that's already built into Word and Outlook. It just took it to the next level, and it could also help analyze my writing to sound either more professional, straightforward. It would ask me, do you want to sound casual, friendly, or professional? It just has so many more advanced features, and it will also pick up on things like, Laura, you've used the word implications way too many times in this paragraph. Do you want, here are a few synonyms. We suggest that you break it up a little bit. So it's been fantastic for me. If you're in a library and you use Canva, Canva has some advanced AI features that help create content and put together, for example, if you use it for marketing at all or for just internal images, it helps generate images and generate content and text for you. So taking some of the work off your plate. Research Rabbit is an excellent tool for finding other citations that are similar to an interesting citation or paper that you have read. And I won't spend too much time on everything because I know that there are lots out there and everyone probably has ideas that they want to share too. So feel free to toss that into the chat bot. I was on a Zoom call with a friend the other day, and she was recording with Otter AI because we were catching up, but we were also talking about a professional opportunity as well. And what Otter AI was doing was capturing our video and was also making her a transcript so that she could review it later. So I thought that that was very interesting too. And I said, where does the data get stored? And I believe she had looked into it too, and it was a walled garden, so she knew it was safe. And so just all these very interesting tools that we could implement to just take some of the work off our plate and make things a bit more polished. And I did want to talk about LLMs because that is where much of the discussion around AI has really exploded as of late. So the big three that have been around for a bit, it's the OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google. So ChatGPT, they came out with their public accessible version to ChatGPT in November 2022, and that was ChatGPT. I believe it was 3, but they have moved on to 3.5. They have 4, now they have 4.0. And they also have DALL-E, which is an image generator. It's really the workhorse of the LLMs. It's what I use quite a bit, and it's focused on creative dialogue. So Claude, it's brought to you by Anthropic. Anthropic's a group of scientists that left OpenAI, and how they brand themselves is they're designed to focus on the ethical AI principles, emphasizing safety and accuracy. And there's Gemini from Google, and Meta has Llama as well. So what's really interesting about these tools is all three of OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google have come out and said, we don't know how they actually generate the information that they generate. They know how they train them just with billions of parameters and tons of data. And they have been developed using the same computer science that I mentioned in the LLM definition and the GPT definition, but there's no playbook and no roadmap on how these actually work and how they give you the information they give you. There's some concerns around this, and we'll get to that, just where I highlight the concerns and some of the ethical issues around LLMs and AI in general. But it's also very fascinating, and it's quite an equalizer because there's no consultant that's going to come in and show you how to use these in the most optimal way. You're going to have to experiment with it yourself. And what I would suggest too, and I'll say it now just so I don't forget to say it at the end, is if you're going to experiment with an LLM and really get to know its nuances and its limitations, is experiment with something that you're already an expert in. I teach RDA and Mark coding, so I feel as though I know it very well. So when I want to see how it's coming along, ChatGPT, sometimes I toss in a title page and I say, please code this for me using Mark coding and RDA. And it has come quite a long way. I haven't been teaching it myself. Somebody has been, though. So it is developing and evolving in real time on how it's coming along there. So take something that you know well and ask it questions. And from there, you're going to see really what you're working with. And it's quite interesting too, because ask it every once in a while, because what you try today is probably going to be the worst AI that you've ever used. It's just only going to get better and more sophisticated and smarter. All right. Now we'll talk about some of the threats and the ethical issues. So as you can imagine and probably heard, a lot of the risk of misinformation. So as mentioned, that OpenAI does not know how ChatGPT comes up with the answers that it has. A lot of times it is right, but sometimes it just makes something up. And these are models that are designed just to make you happy and please you. It wants to give you an answer. So it's going to give you an answer even if it has no idea. And it's just going to give you an answer based on predictions in data. I'm sure many of you have heard of the headline about the lawyer who the legal team was using ChatGPT to prepare for court and was getting information from it, and ChatGPT hallucinated. So that means it just made up, it kind of BS's you in a way. It made up a court case and they used that in their case, and they were called out on it and fined and in trouble. It was a completely made up case. So there's going to be misinformation. You always want to fact check if you're using an LLM. AI bias. Now, I want to preface this with AIs don't actually have thoughts and feelings now anyway. But since they're trained on the internet, which is not the world's most friendliest educational facility, they're going to perpetuate biases present in the data that they're trained on. Back in 2018, I think it was, Amazon tossed their recruitment AI software because it didn't like women. It would get rid of resumes and applications with what it interpreted it as female names. And that doesn't mean it itself was biased against women, but whomever developed it obviously was. There's the copyright concerns too. So who actually owns the information generated by LLMs? That is still for courts to decide. And the information that they create, it's coming from other information on the internet, even if it's not necessarily making it up. Some information that they're regurgitating is not blatant plagiarism. However, it is still somebody somewhere, someone else's intellectual property out there. There are also privacy concerns and data sovereignty issues based on all the LLMs that are coming out. When you type something in Where does it go? This is why I always recommend don't give it personal information, don't give it corporate trade secrets. And this is also why we have people taking such a hard turn against AI and saying nobody at work is allowed to use AI because our privacy uh, is compromised. So that's a concern. And we really need to educate people on the privacy issues and have them use it with caution. Still use it, but just use it with caution. There are environmental concerns too. So I have to check a fact here, but the New Yorker estimated that ChatGPT is consuming more than 500,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per day. So that's quite a bit. And I've seen headlines recently too that ChatGPT, Google, a lot of the larger companies that are developing LLMs and fine tuning them are looking at using nuclear power to just cut down on the electricity that they're using. Again, that could be a controversial issue as well. There's the power allocation to the companies that are creating these. The big tech puts lots and lots of money into lobbying. Are they really developing these with an ethical mindset for all of humanity? Or are they developing these and making just tons of money? So you do have to think about the power allocation here. There's ethics around training of the LLMs too, which I read not too long ago that when they're originally training the LLMs, it had to be humans that were asking it questions and then saying, no, that's a good answer, that's a bad answer. But again, remember the LLM doesn't have feelings. So it's before they released it, they had to make sure it wasn't going to give terrible advice or say terrible things. So it was humans that had to sit there and train it not to, suggest how to murder someone and get away with it, or not to generate any hate speech. And this really took a toll on people day in and day out, training these large language models on how to just not be evil. There's malicious usage of AI. I'm sure everyone's heard the odd story of somebody's grandparent who was called and there was a voice on the other end and it sounded exactly like their grandchild, and they said that they're in trouble and they needed a ransom money or bail money or something, and they panicked and sent it to them. So there's malicious use, and AIs will make deep fakes a lot more believable. So that's a concern. So the education around identifying AI images, AI videos, AI audio is really important. There's the fear of redundancy of work. And you hear every once in a while, okay, these jobs could be abolished and replaced by AI. So for example, telemarketing could be abolished by AI. I don't think that the majority of jobs don't need to worry, because you think of your work and you think of one task you do and another task you do and all the meetings and all the presentations and all the other background work and the network of your day-to-day office and life. There's might be some small elements that you could offload onto AI, but not our whole jobs. There's a lot of lack of leadership and regulation around AI too. It seems like countries and leaders and industries can't really get on board with where AI is going and heading, and how to put up guardrails and regulations, mostly because it's advancing at just such a astronomical speed. Bureaucratically, it's hard to keep up. But then if you look at a micro level too at your organization, you might not have an AI policy, or maybe you have an AI policy that's based on fear and says don't use AI, which is never a good idea, because that's going to lead to a lot of shadow use of AI. you might not be able to use ChatGPT on your work computer, but people are still going to be using it on their phones, or they're going to be asking it questions when they go home and on their own computers afterwards. So, and that's going to lead to their own issues. So really what we want to do is create leadership within our own organizations, educate people on the tools, how they should be used, and get them access to frontier models. There's the loss of human connection. We've seen that a lot over the rise of social media, over COVID. We are more connected than ever. However, we are also very lonely, and we're losing a lot of the human connection. There's one app that's very fascinating. It's called Replica, and it was made by a scientist who had lost her best friend. And so she downloaded all of their texts back and forth and created a bot, an LLM that would talk back and forth to her just like her best friend. So it's as though she could still be in touch with him and text him. And that's it. It is now an app that you can use, and it's advertised as this could be your significant other. Are you tired of dating? We get it. Just download this app. You can tell it the human you want it to be, and it will be your significant other. And I don't know if that's really the solution to loneliness at all. It's also kind of frightening too, because there was a assassination attempt years ago on Queen Elizabeth II when she was still around. A man broke in with a crossbow with the intention of assassinating her. So this isn't AI's fault, but he had a replica significant other, and he would talk to her about his idea, and she would respond, wow, this is fascinating. No one has ever said anything like this. You're such an interesting person. You're so brave, and you're really going to take action. And she kind of egged him on, because these models will tell us what we want to hear. And so that kind of perpetuated his attempt there. There's the threat of AI itself. There's those who see a future that looks more like a Terminator or a Matrix type future. There's scientists that say there should be a big halt to it, and because they're looking at it like the Manhattan Project, and it scares them. And then as the pendulum swings the other way, there can be too many rules and regulations too, and we're not going to be able to really understand it and implement it in a ethical and productive manner. So I'm sorry, some of that does sound bleak, and I understand that. So I'm trying to end on an opportunistic note too. I do see that there's so many ways that it's going to be fascinating, and if we harness it and we understand it and we move forward in a responsible way, I think AI is really a good thing as well. So the Urban Library Council published a brief about a year ago, and I really like this quote. They say an ideal future is one where AI augments productivity of current organizational processes, workflow systems, and personnel. And it can do this while creating new businesses and equitable pathways to wealth that are more broadly distributed. And libraries can be a key player in ushering in the preferred future with AI. And yes, I think we do need to think about what is our preferred future and how can we help develop that. And I think we play a significant role in educating others on AI. And AI can be a huge equalizer too, which is wonderful. So we have opportunities here to look at eternal efficiencies at work or in your own life, but replace some repetitive tasks responsibly and ethically. So certain report generation or status updates, workload management, there's all types of AI calendars, scheduling, writing assistants. I use ChatGPT sometimes. I feel like I'm a good writer, and I want to be the one who writes my content, but I will type things into ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm really stuck on this sentence. Can you give me 5 different examples of this sentence written in another way? And then it will, and I won't take any one of those sentences, but I'll look at it and I'll grab ideas that I like here and there, and then I'll come up with something on my own. So use it as a bit of a co-pilot for myself. And as I mentioned, there's AIs that will do transcripts for you, AIs that will clean up material for you. So AIs that will read through things for you. I just purchased a new internet service provider, and I had ChatGPT read through the terms and conditions, and I said, hey, can you just tell me if there's anything I need to be mindful of here? And it said, it looks standard, but here's a couple things that you might want to flag or review. So looking at good ethical ways that you're not going to give it too much information, but it can help you and help you with tasks and help you with other things. Implementation, I suggest creating a working group to develop a policy or guideline at your workplace if you don't have one already. I would ask your vendors how they're using AI and where the data is. That's very important, and they need to be transparent about it as well. Carefully review anything you are implementing and be transparent about implementation. If you're starting to implement AI in a way, you do need to tell your colleagues, your staff, your clients about it. Look at what other libraries are doing that are kind of interesting. San Jose was doing some AI implementation to measure their performance. I was at Banque in Montreal, their public library, and there is a pavilion set up, and the students there were working with an AI bot. What they did was they gave everyone a paragraph typed out, and then they had us write in our own handwriting, and then they took it back, what was written on the paragraph, and they didn't take any of our information. They just were scanning handwriting so that eventually when our handwriting becomes obsolete and messy to read, just as if we're reading a old postcard from World War I, their AI should be able to translate it and read it for people futuristically. And I thought it was a really interesting project, and the AI they're using was called Kraken. I was looking for libraries that were collaborating with AI technology, and Lehman College was collaborating with its tech department. Students were building a chatbot, and the chatbot was what a chatbot is. It would help with site navigation and tell you frequently asked questions around when libraries are open or closed, etc. And we have a huge role to play in digital inclusion and advocacy to raise awareness of the digital equity barriers. While AI is a huge equalizer, remember there are people without access to the internet, there are people who aren't quite as good at digital literacy, and there are people who just struggle with the fear of AI itself. So we do want to be champions of AI literacy, just like we're champions of literal literacy and digital literacy. Okay, and we're going to also create opportunities for discovery. There are some libraries out there doing fantastic things, introducing their community to AI, for example, by running an AI poetry workshop. And finally, we want to ensure we're at the leadership table with this. So we want these basics and this background so we can speak about it. And we want to know the implications, positive and negative. And we want to be at the leadership table. So if you're at a law firm, you should be at the leadership table when the partners are discussing AI strategy and policy going forward at the firm. You're not just going to train everyone and help out. You know how people interact with information. You are the professional here. You are the expert on this. You need to be at the leadership table. I'm going to leave you with a couple of resources here that have been really great for understanding AI's impact. So Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. This is just a great book. It's very smart, but accessible about how to live and work with AI. Ethan Mollick is also the author of a Substack called One Useful Thing. He is a professor of business at Wharton University. He is just really great at explaining ChatGPT and giving you examples of how it can work with you for you. And he has some parting advice, which I'll show you on my second to last slide next. So, and he's the one that says, nobody knows how this works. All we can do is experiment. So he does give you ways to approach it. The next book is Age of Revolutions. This is not about AI, but we can learn from history. It examines historical and more current day revolutions that have happened. So the Protestant Reformation, the Industrial Revolution, the French Revolution, and more recently, globalization, the information highway, identity politics. It looks at how these big waves and movements have changed our lives and how they've changed how we interact with each other, our sense of self. And this is what's going to happen with AI, but even at a more vast and widespread way. And finally, Nexus. So this isn't for anyone if you're weak stomached about AI, but it looks at history of information networks from the Stone Age to AI, of storytelling, of misinformation, of how algorithms do push content to the top, but it's not necessarily true content. It's not necessarily helpful content. It's a great book to be aware of things and what's coming. Okay, and I'm going to leave you just after this basic introduction of AI with Ethan Mollick's 4 rules for moving forward. So always invite AI to the table because it's here to stay. So anything you do, think about how AI could be involved. I'm not saying that you have to sign on with them, just always think about how they could be involved. Always be the human in the loop. We've mentioned that AI can produce misinformation and it'll hallucinate things that are not true. So it needs to be supervised. It still needs to be fact checked. Please always be the person overseeing AI. Don't blindly take its answers. Three, treat AI like a human. It's programmed to act like a human. It's actually people who deal with humans or work with humans who are going to get more out of LLMs than computer programmers or computer scientists, to be honest. So parents, managers, teachers, librarians, lawyers, business people, people who are dealing with people, you're going to get more out of it. But tell it what kind of a human to be. So give it a lot of feedback, spend some time with it, push through the wrong answers, push through the weirdness of it all, and tell it what you need and see how it evolves. And I mentioned this earlier, assume this is the worst AI you're ever going to use. It's just evolved in leaps and bounds just within a matter of a couple of years. Assume that even if it's doing something wrong right now, try it again later. It might be doing it right then. All right, and I am happy to continue this discussion at any point. So here's my contact information, and I'm on LinkedIn. Just give me a shout. And again, thank you so much for coming out today.
That was great, Laura. That's a good start to our day, and you had some really a lot of things for us to think about. There are a couple of quick questions for like the 2 minutes we have left.
Okay. Okay.
The first one is, in your experience, how expensive are some of these AI tools? It seems that something as simple as a recommendation engine for books and articles should be relatively inexpensive, yet not many libraries offer such a tool.
Ooh, we have not implemented anything significant. Well, we use Novelist, which in a way it uses AI. I would have to say, I'm not going to hallucinate an answer. I'm going to have to say that I have not done a lot of digging into these tools. So it might be a question better answered by a panelist this afternoon who is showing you more tools. For using ChatGPT, I am spending about $20 a month on a frontier model there. I'm
Okay.
sorry if I not answered that one
All
to
right.
the
And then
best.
we also have another question. Has your library implemented AI into the workflow for library staff of all levels, or is it still on an individual basis based on workload and tasks assigned?
Our library is still on an individual basis. Now, our marketing team did just get a blanket Grammarly plugin for everyone working on the team. They also use Canva AI, and they've also used, um, uh, I think they use Copilot to help write a bit of content as well. Not used widespread as of yet.
Okay, great. Well, we're out of time. Thank you again, Laura. Excuse me. And for everyone, at top of the hour, we will have another session, and it will be Amanda Sweet talking about supporting tech pipelines for AI, VR, and beyond. So please come back for that. And thanks again, Laura. That was great.